This is episode 181 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Welcome to episode 181 of the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today I have Charles Crompton on the show, and I'm not going to give a big intro on Charles. The main takeaway from this episode is this guy, with a handful of properties, decided that he was going to quit his job and go full-time into Airbnb Arbitrage. So he set up a model and set up a business, and he hit the ground running. He's amassed a very, very good quantity of rental units already in his portfolio. And he went through the strategy that he uses to get landlords on board. And it's absolutely insane what he's accomplished in just 6 months' time. So this is a really inspiring episode. Just goes to show how quickly somebody can turn an idea into a full-time income. I really think that's well worth sharing as a story. So super excited to share this episode with you, and I think you're really going to get a lot out of it. As always, I want to ask you to please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit all the buttons and subscribe. Just leave us a comment, help more people find the show. Be greatly appreciated. And without further ado, let's jump into episode 181 with Charles Crompton. Hello and welcome to the Andrew Hines Real Estate Investing Podcast. Today I have Charles Crompton on the show. Charles, thanks for being here.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So Charles, tell me a little bit about how this interview came to be.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. Well, I was listening to one of your earlier podcasts. Someone had recommended it to me, and it was on Airbnb rental arbitrage. And something struck me about that concept and that idea. And in short, it had both my wife and I quit our jobs to start up an arbitrage business full time.
So you're saying that this show actually inspired you to quit your job, and oh wow,
yes, sir. I had
cool.
Heard of arbitrage. Going through social media, I had seen a couple videos on it, but I hadn't heard of it in Canada. And someone said, well, there's a video on the Andrew Hines podcast, which I had heard of before. And so I got on, listened to that interview. And that just gave me the confidence and conviction that this was the right thing for us. So we quit and here we are today. But I guess there's more of the backstory I'll need to share at some point as well.
Well, yeah, for sure. I want to get you to share that. But yeah, okay. So tell me about you as an investor. When did you start investing? Is it investing or is it just arbitrage?
No. So I've been investing both in real estate and stock investing really since out of university. So I bought my first rental property when I was pretty young. But on the real estate side, I would say I've been relatively passive. Buying turnkey properties and having long-term tenants. And not being too active with that space. My experience and background, even from a corporate perspective, my corporate experience, designations and whatnot, is all on the stock investing side. And so we've created some wealth through RSPs and TFSAs and just diversified long-term stock portfolios.
Okay. So what did you go to school for?
Yeah, I went to school for business, commerce, finance was my major in the last year there. And then coming out of school, I got a job in the finance industry with Edward Jones, an investment firm. And then I continued on that track. So getting designations, my CFP, chartered investment manager. Mm-hmm. And so most of my background is on stock and typical wealth through the markets. Real estate's always been something I've been doing on the side until arbitrage.
Okay, so you're just doing it on the side. So before arbitrage, how many properties did you have in your portfolio?
Not many. 3 total.
Okay, 3 total. And have you bought more, or is it just arbitrage at this point?
Yeah, good question. We had a very strategic approach. The idea was to create that cash flow through arbitrage. And then start to acquire more properties as well and use our company then to manage those properties. So we just purchased 2 in Calgary, and we will be looking to ramp up acquisitions owning these properties.
Okay, I'm gonna have so many questions for you. I'm like, where do I even start? What do I want to ask next? Okay, so first off, as the financial planner, I mean,
Yeah.
that's typically a role where you're saying, mutual funds, and I've sat with them as well. Um, Obviously, stuff that doesn't earn like what real estate investors earn. So, has this sort of been, seeing the light, making a change, or is this something that you see as a complement to what you do? Philosophically, when you're selling investments to people, um, do you still see the best value for them to be investing in those type of products, or are you still doing that with Edward Jones, or that's not anymore?
No, both my wife and I
Oh yeah,
quit
you
our
quit, you quit,
jobs,
you quit.
and we quit fast before we even started arbitrage. To
Really?
be fair, yeah, we jumped right in. But your question's a big one on the philosophy of it all, and I would say that the that with arbitrage in particular, it was the potential for really high cash flow returns. It's a business, in my opinion, more so than just an investment strategy to run arbitrage. I mean, you can pick up a few arbitrage properties for sure, but it was this business concept that just made a lot of sense, and I saw a potential to replace our corporate incomes real fast. It was about the cash on cash return,
Mm-hmm.
and that's ultimately what had us, leave our corporate jobs. But certainly, I still see a ton of merit in stock investing. The basic way that what people are aware of, or most people, it's slower. It's a slower grind to create wealth for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But if you have the right advice, and you have the right techniques in place for proper leverage, smart leverage, you can actually achieve a lot of the same types of returns as real estate, which is really that leverage return, right? It can be achieved in the stock world as well. You just
Mm-hmm.
need to have the right strategy.
Right. Yeah. You got to be a little bit more sophisticated, but the same thing goes in real estate. You got to become sophisticated. You have to learn, which, I mean, there's a lot of education for it out there. I haven't really looked to see if equivalent education exists in the podcast world for stock investing. I'm sure it does. But just never really been much of a passion of mine. But of course, yes, I know, and more often I'm seeing a lot of the real estate investors on here are also stock investors or options traders. That's a common one, which I'm sure you've heard about.
Absolutely, very familiar. Not my cup of tea. Yeah, similar with real estate, I do prefer to buy quality and hold it for the long term,
Mm-hmm.
and then using that leverage to compound the growth more so
Yeah.
than trying to do the stuff that takes more of your time. Like options trading requires an incredible amount of day to day research and
Yeah.
time. Whereas if you buy the right quality real estate,
Mm-hmm.
and you have the right teams, it shouldn't need much of your time. And similar to
No.
a buying quality stocks and having a diversified strategy and a process in place, it pretty much builds and grows itself. So you just follow the process you built ahead of time, and
Right.
pretty easy.
Yeah, you got to follow your process. That's right.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's get into where you live. So, like, which geographic region are you?
Yeah, we're in Burlington, so
Okay,
just outside of Toronto, obviously.
same
And
here.
yeah, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. And in terms of our Airbnb operations, we are mostly in southwestern Ontario here. So Burlington, Hamilton, Kitchener, Waterloo, London, Windsor is a lot of our main hubs, and now we're also in Calgary and Moncton, New
So you're
Brunswick.
doing arbitrage in all those places?
Yes, sir.
Holy moly. Okay, so tell me about step one. When you started, you heard it on my podcast. What was going through your head? Why did you say I can do this?
Yeah, geez, good question. So, I mean, my wife and I have always been focused on, creating wealth and retiring early. Financial freedom has always been that direction. We don't want to be part of the rat race for our whole lives. We want to spend more time with our family and our friends, and that's what has pushed us, through our wealth creation goals to this point. And then I guess kind of what happened in just this past summer. So it wasn't that long. Just this past summer, we just realized, definitely how grateful we were, but we were on track towards all of our big goals. Right? We lived in we live in a beautiful home. We're raising a beautiful family. We have a 2-year-old daughter, and we were easily on track without any further effort, really, to retire. Somewhere in our late 40s, and which is great. And we're, grateful for that. But then we kind of thought, well, geez, it's 15 years at least until then. And what now? Like, are we really just gonna kind of live our 9-to-5 jobs, do the rat race for 15 more years? there just seemed like we wanted to at least explore, what else can we do to kind of expand our purpose or our goals. And that's when we started, being more proactive and doing some research on the investment strategy, specifically with creating cash flow. So we had created wealth. We have wealth, again, large stock portfolios and some real estate. So we had wealth, but we were trying to explore ways that we can create passive income to quit our jobs, essentially. And we thought, and maybe in a few years, anyway, I listened to this arbitrage podcast of yours more than once.
Which episode was it?
It was a couple, I think. You had a really early one.
Sandy Khan.
That's the one. Yes, sir. And then you had another one with Aaron Bay, who has gone on to do some crazy successful stuff since that podcast. And these podcasts just resonated with me. And maybe it was of course, the cash on cash return possibilities were there. It was obvious, and it was a proven concept in Canada. And so that to me made me think that we can do this. And a lot of our skill sets, my wife and I, we knew that we could create the teams and create a business out of this. But maybe the biggest thing about the arbitrage for me, which didn't necessarily come out on those podcasts, I saw the value in it as a real estate investor who wanted to hold long-term properties. And I guess what I mean by that is I saw an obvious value proposition that we could provide a service to real estate investors. That if someone approached me with this model saying, "Hey, I want to lease your property, and this is what I'm going to do, and this is why you'd want to lease to me," I thought it just made perfect sense. Like that, it solved an issue with real estate investing, right? Which is the tenant. A lot of challenges, a lot of risks that come with that long-term tenant, and if we could solve that challenge for investors, we can create a business with a clear need and a clear value proposition. And so we went to work on the research and building out the value prop and running it by hypothetical real estate investors. And once we had conviction that people wanted this and would value our service, we quit and went all in.
So you talked to real estate investors and said, "Would you rent your place out to us?"
Yeah, that was the early stages of the research. Aside from running the numbers, making sure the math worked, there's the profit margins there. That was all the obvious stuff. The next big question was, would enough people see the value in this? And so I just started networking with real estate investors. And what I found was beneficial was not going to them with a specific property in mind, because then there's a lot of, you don't get people's honest reactions. They're defensive. They're not answering questions clearly because they're kind of defending their property. But if you just network and you reach out to someone to say, "Hey, I know you invest in real estate. I had this, business idea or concept. Does this make sense to you?" Just open and honestly. And if not, why not? And so essentially I started compiling a list of the objections, why they might not like it and why they would like it. And then essentially we just use that to create a value prop and create a business model and practice and value proposition that we knew we can deliver on. And once we had that, I essentially went out kind of cold calling, and it didn't take long before we had a whole bunch of people ready to sign leases. And that's when we pulled the trigger. We had, 6 or 7 leases all at once, the capital ready to go, the teams in business ready to go. And we kind of looked at each other, my wife and I, and we said like, "Hey, this isn't going to be a side hustle thing. This is either we're quitting and we're going all in to build this company, or we're not. And what do we want to do?" And so we thought, let's give it a shot.
Okay. And what was your value proposition when you called somebody? How did you put it in simple terms that made it appealing to them?
Yeah, we are the ideal solution as their tenant. And so, and I would share what we have now, which is that we have real estate investors who have multiple properties in multiple cities, and we are their tenant and property manager for all their properties. And so you can imagine that as yourself as a real estate investor, you have a separate lease signed and a different tenant in each property, and you do your best to vet, but at the end of the day, you're not sure what you're getting. Well, once they know and trust us, my wife and I, we are their one tenant and one property manager for all their properties. And it's peace of mind. It's peace of mind, and it's time back in their lives to spend on things that are more important to them. Frankly, it's also dollars. They don't have to pay for a property manager. We do it all.
And are you paying market rent?
It depends on the property and the situation. Typically, it's something just under market rent. The cost saved for them on property management just makes it simple for them, and will lease their property as long as they like. So we definitely bring a lot of value to the table,
Okay.
but it's in that ballpark. It's around market rent.
So when you're like, are these truly cold calls or are they warm calls? Like when you're reaching out to landlords?
They were full-on cold calls for the first handful. After that, cold calls weren't needed. We kind of are overloaded, frankly, with referrals and people reaching out through social media and other platforms asking if we'll lease their property.
Okay, so people seem to be responding to it. You just get on the phone with them, and what are the main points you'd start to hit? Introduce yourself, and hey, I heard that you're a real estate owner. Just curious if you have any vacancies. Like, are you starting it like that, or are you diving into concept?
I see. Yeah, usually there's a property in mind with these that the real estate investors have been reaching out over the last number of months saying, hey, we have this property, would you lease from us? So it's almost, frankly, it's been them pitching to us.
That's what I mean. That's warm. But you going on to Kijiji, seeing a listing and calling up Fred, the property owner.
In the beginning. Yeah. It was very templated and took a long time to develop the relationship. So I'd just send a message over Facebook or Kijiji. That's exactly right for a vacancy that I saw that fit our property criteria. I'd send them a note to say, hey, we're qualified tenants. If you have 5 minutes, could we chat about a potential solution here? And so I was just trying to get them on the phone.
Yeah.
If you share the concept that is new to someone over Kijiji, no. So let's get them on the phone. And then I was very upfront right away, quick, very short and to the point to say, this is what we do. We lease properties from real estate investors. And then we put that property up on Airbnb and we manage your property entirely. And I just stopped because obviously that's a lot of information already.
Right. But dissect that moment right there, because people hear Airbnb and I'm not sure if there's a negative connotation there, right? If I said, I rent your property and then I release it to students, I know that I'm going to get, oh, no, not students. We're not doing that.
Yes.
Do they have a similar resistance point to Airbnb, or are they favorable to that?
I would say it's a mixed bag. Some are quite, they have a negative reaction to it. Others right off the hop are interested in it. But I find that the conversation generally goes the same way. As long as they're open to chat, I just have the short pitch to say what we do. And then I let them ask their questions because I want to know where their concerns or hesitations might be. And so I let them ask the next question to say, oh, well, are you sure you'll even get people renting in our area in the suburbs? Like, how will you be able to pay us and rent it out? So I'll talk to that a little bit. Or like, what about the damage and how that? So I'll share on how we monitor the properties, how we vet guests, how we inspect the properties after every guest. And so once they start asking questions and they realize that in order for our business to be successful, so and then that's essentially what the realization is. They're looking at me or they're talking to me and they realize, in order for us to be successful, we need to keep their property in pristine condition at all times.
Yeah. And even saying that to them, like, let's face it, like, I'm a super host. If I want to stay a super host, your place needs to be in tip top shape always.
That's it. And that's kind of the game. They kind of realize, right. And that and I show them, I can bring up, usually we're on a Zoom call. I usually try to get them ultimately onto a Zoom conversation after the first quick chat. I send them some more information about our company, then set up time to have a Zoom chat. I show them our listings and they kind of realize like their property will always look like this. And I explain that once a guest checks out, our cleaners and our teams go in there, not just to deep clean. After every single guest, your property is going to have a deep clean, but it's also inspected for any damage of any kind. And I say, if there's so much as a new mark on the wall, even a small one, it's fixed immediately by us. No hassle or payment from you. That we take care of all that. And all of a sudden,
you do like color match paint and stuff. Like you do all that. You'll repaint the wall if needed.
All of it. And then when they start to ask some more detailed questions about the property management side, well, what about this and this? And for each location, we have our power teams, right? So we have a go-to handyman, plumber, electrician. And so based on what our needs are, unless they have a preferred contact, of course, we'll use theirs. But I essentially say, no matter what happens at your property, we will be on standby with our trusted contacts to handle the issue. And so all of a sudden they're realizing like we are that all-in-one package. We're going to be the ones paying them the rent and taking care of their property.
So what happens if the issue, like you're calling your plumber, if it's assuming it's a tenant created problem, However, what if it's a fundamental building problem? Are you paying to fix that?
No. Yeah, and so that's the typical balance between the property owner and the tenant. Except in this case, since we're the tenant, we won't put up any fuss. We just get things done right away. If there's anything at all related to guests, we take care of it. But no, structural things, general wear and tear over time, we expect the property owner to take that responsibility.
What about roots and their sanitary connection, and they have a backup in the basement? Then what do you do?
Yes, yeah, that's tough, and so that's again the responsibility probably on the landlord in that case, with the trees and the roots. But it does have an impact to our business.
It would have a big impact on your business. That's a stinky stay, right? You're gonna have some guests that aren't too pleased, right?
That's it. And frankly, we had a scenario or two over this winter or spring. We have our 30 properties now in these cities, and you're bound to have that stuff, and those are just losses that you need to take. And over a diversified portfolio, these are things that you have to expect, that you're going to have some monthly losses for a couple of properties, but part of the business.
Yeah. So how does that affect you if something like that happens? Is it the initial stays you have to comp them back, basically give them or pay for them to stay somewhere else? And and you're doing that to save your reviews. Like obviously you don't want them leaving a negative review. So you got to go in there and do damage control.
That's it. It's all acting with urgency and respecting our clients who are our guests. And so really just doing everything we can to mitigate their issue, right? They wanted a place to stay for whatever reason. And our objective is to mitigate the stress or impact on them. And so thankfully we have lots of properties. And so lots of the time we are able to get them up into another one of our properties. If not, we'll pay for them to stay at a hotel. We'll sort of solve the cost afterwards. We know that if we're going to run a successful business, our clients need to be happy. So we start with that. Yeah.
Worry about the dollars and cents later, fix the problem first, and then go from there. So
that's it.
Hospitality business, that's the nature of it.
That's it. And we just have two clients in this case, right? So our two bodies of clients, we have our guests, that's the Airbnb business. And then we have our property owners or real estate investors, and those are our clients too. That's what we consider. We need to deliver our value prop for our real estate investors as well as for our Airbnb guests.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, in terms of the teams that you set up, I'm assuming you started locally. Like you were in Burlington, you decided to start the company. You have 6 leases, you said, that were basically put on your table.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so before we get into the teams, who's writing your leases?
I am typically. My wife and I are on those leases.
Okay, so you guys are on the leases. It's obviously the Ontario lease in Ontario, but you have an addendum. Does that addendum give you the ability to break? Do you have the ability to exit the lease if something comes up? What kind of notice do you need to give?
That's right. The addendum has our standard provisions. That's the biggest one. And it's only in the call it unlikely scenario where a bylaw is introduced that essentially shuts our business down at their property. That allows us to break the lease and provide that 30 or 60 days notice, depending on the property owner.
So you're not an open lease otherwise, or is it a year lease?
Typically, we do 18 months or 2-year lease, just from our business model, that the costs of investing into the property, right? So we sign a lease for an empty home. We spend 15 to 20 grand to furnish and decor, stage the place, and then we want to make sure we're getting our return on investment. And so we need at least 18 months in the spring, so it kind of gives us 2 summers. But if we're signing a lease at the end of the summer, September, October, November, we're looking for 2-year leases.
Okay, so you want that. Now, what if you're in an area that you're not sure of the concept? Like a small market where you're just not quite sure how it'll play out.
That's Moncton right now. We just expanded to Moncton, and we're just launching with the one property. And we're in this scenario, it's more of an open lease structure with the real estate investor. It's someone who fully understands the value of our business. We didn't have to pitch much to him. He just fully understood it.
Yeah.
And investor speaking to investor, we were just saying, hey, we are kind of piloting the area, which does him a favor too. He's interested in the short-term rental market space as well. And so we're essentially saying, hey, we're going to give this a shot. But if we need to close out the lease, we'll give you notice, and we'll even help you try to find someone to fill the spot.
Okay. So and in that case, you're out the investment of 20 grand to stage it.
That's it.
Now, you can reuse some of that stuff, can't you? If you have to pull it out. I mean, I guess the problem becomes storing your Airbnb furniture, right? You're going to need a facility if you're starting to pull all that stuff out.
Yes, which we are starting to put together in our bigger hubs like Kitchener, Waterloo. We have, I don't know, at least 12 properties now or so. And so it makes sense to have a storage available for all kinds of stuff. Moncton, out of province, we did our due diligence on the research. We have no reason to expect our Moncton property to not be extremely successful. So we have a high level of confidence.
Yeah.
But yeah, if that one doesn't go as planned, it's going to be tough to move our furniture or store it. We were probably going to be out the investment, but it was, given the risk reward, we thought it made sense.
Okay. So you're saying that it is possible even around here that you make a move where it ends up not being a great decision. And what are some examples of that? Like what cities were you not quite sure when you went into them?
Windsor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what made you not sure about it?
It was just the overall Airbnb revenue, the margins. The margin. Yeah. We weren't sure if it was going to be there, if we were going to get the consistency of occupancy, and to be frank, the quality of guests.
Yeah.
That every location attracts different Airbnbers, and we saw a lot of concern from Windsor properties that there's a lot of complaints or issues with guests either throwing parties or causing damage at properties.
Okay, you thought you'd get partiers in Windsor? Why would you assume that? People coming over from the States?
Yeah, exactly. So, but so far so good. Our margins there, although still aren't as great as some of our other cities, but they're doing just fine.
Okay, so teams wise, what are you doing to assemble a team in a new market? Like, you make a decision to go into Windsor. Do you feel like you're starting from scratch?
Yes, in some regards. We're essentially building out the power team now before we launch to a new city. So in the beginning, just for some context for the listeners, we quit our jobs we submitted our resignations in the beginning of December, like 5 months ago.
Okay.
And after submitting our resignations, we launched our first couple of properties in December, and now we have almost 30. And so
That's insane, man.
It's wild. But in doing that, I mean, it has its pros and cons, right? You have to know that if you want to grow that quickly through, in 5 months, there's going to be some costs in learning, which we were good with. We knew we had the capital, to learn, and we wanted to scale quickly for a number of reasons. And so we were launching in new areas without proper teams in place. We had processes in place, but the people are so important. You have to have trusted contacts. So for Windsor, we weren't starting from scratch from a process perspective, but we didn't have reliable contacts, and yet we had leases signed. And so it does take time to find reliable people.
Do you go to each area, or are you just on the phone the whole time?
Yeah, Windsor is a great example. None of the partners have stepped foot in Windsor. So it's my wife and I who kind of started the arbitrage concept, but we quickly found ground floor partners who really are responsible for the Airbnb operation. So there's the 4 of us that are owning and running this business.
Yeah.
And none of us have stepped foot in Windsor. We've launched 3 properties there and a few in London. We haven't been there yet.
Okay, so walk me through what you're looking for. We'll start with London for an example, because I'm familiar with that town. So in London, what were you looking for? What neighborhood? What type of house?
Yeah, so that's also been a learning for us. Each market seems to have a different type of successful property. For the most part, what we're seeing is a smaller duplex or multifamily property has the best margins for us.
Smaller duplex. Okay. So like, is it a bungalow with an up down, or is it something else. Because London was never huge for the up-down bungalow. That's not that common there.
No. And so, and you're right. And we only have a couple properties in London, but call it in Kitchener, lots of duplexes, same in Hamilton. And those seem to be performing the best. It's just the extra doors, right?
Yeah, extra doors.
But square footage is important. So we had a lot of single family homes in the beginning, even some larger ones like 3 and 4 bedroom single family homes with a lot of square footage, and the ROI and margins neither made sense. So we're kind of moving away from those. It's just a much bigger investment to fill the space with furniture and decor, and yet they only garnered a slight bit more from Airbnb revenue than a smaller property. So smaller, cuter, small,
sleep a lot of people. That's
more people, and as long as it's kind of cute and nicely designed, so less square footage, more bedrooms, more units, but it needs to be in pristine condition. That's kind of what our main requirement. We're not taking on any properties that have really any issues. It needs to be a recently renovated property.
So, I mean, just to clarify, when you say in the beginning, you mean 5 months ago?
Yeah, that's right. That's certainly one of our learnings. We had all these investors, ready to sign leases, and we wanted to start growing our business. So I think we took on in the first month or two, we took on properties that we certainly wouldn't take on now. They're still okay. They're profitable. We just know that if we can really be strategic and intentional about the properties that we take on with the data we now have that supports which ones are performing better than others, it goes a long way.
But I mean, you talk about seasonality, you talk about wanting to hit summer. I mean, is summer really more popular in all these cities? Because it's not like London's a tourist town. It's not like they're coming to go to the beach. It's just a very, middle class town in the middle of nowhere, effectively.
Yeah, correct. And from what we've seen with Airbnb data, and so a couple of our partners are CFA and CPA, and so they know how to run their numbers and do the research. You make a great point. We find almost every city to be seasonal, but depending on the season, it's
in different
more
ways.
Seasonal.
Right?
Yeah.
Is it different ways?
Right.
Like some cities, maybe winter is more popular. And then, I mean, of course, if you're up north, it would be, but.
True. No, I would say at least we're mostly in suburbs, in different ones across Southern Ontario. So I don't think it's too different. And what we expect to see and what we see in the data we've collected is that the summer certainly outperforms the winter by quite a margin. It would be even more so in your touristy or vacation spots, but
that's surprising
most of our properties
to hear.
aren't there.
That's surprising to hear. Like why? I mean, I guess for weddings and stuff, more people are doing that in the summer. So it could be things like that. Do you have any sort of explanation for that? I mean, you haven't actually had a summer yet, but what are your thoughts?
I think people make more travel plans for the nicer weather months. In the winter, I would say what we're seeing is more they require stays, and they're like midterm and longer term in the winter. So what I mean by that is they're either traveling for work because they have to, and they plan to be there for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, or their home is getting renovated, or they have troubles at their home, and so they need a place to stay for the winter. So they need to be there, and therefore they're longer stays. Whereas people plan all kinds of gatherings with family. It's not necessarily touristy stuff. It just people spend more time traveling in the nicer months because it's just nicer to do that. So no matter where the city is, you just get shorter stays and more frequent need.
Okay, so let's go back to the type of unit. So a duplex, not really a vacation type of home, but then again, if it's got a nice, cute look and it's got bedrooms that they need and parking, I guess everyone needs parking.
Yeah. All of our it's a big requirement for our properties to have sufficient parking. Yeah.
Okay, so would the basement need 2 parking spots or 1?
As long as the upper and lower have a separate spot, usually that works. Yeah,
1 spot's good. Okay. So what type of numbers would you be getting on the duplex in London? Say it was, I don't know if you give me an example of the property that you have in London.
Yeah, sure. So if we had a 3-bedroom upstairs and a 2-bedroom downstairs,
so bungalow
type of property, rough numbers, I would say, it would cost us about 20 grand to stage the whole place, furniture and decor.
Yeah.
And our target return on that investment is 125%. And so we would look to make about 25 grand per year in net profit after all expenses.
Okay, so let's break down how that would look. So that bungalow duplex, what are you expecting your average rents to be across the upper unit, say the three bed? Do you have a ballpark? Or if you know the number for the whole thing, tell me that.
I would say I should have brought on my partners, Tracy and the CP and CFA who run all these numbers for us. But I think in the summertime for a 3-bedroom upper, we might be looking at $165 a night type thing, and for the lower unit, it might be 125, 135.
Okay, and so that's kind of
it's in the $300.
Yeah. So is that like 3 months of the year you generate that, or that's the high and what's the low if we were to average it throughout the year?
Yeah, the low might come down to, I would say that's probably mid-range, frankly, Andrew. That's probably $300 a night.
Averaging across the year.
Yes, that's right.
What kind of
the peak months will do better
have?
than that. We have at least 80% occupancy for the year, and I'd say more typically 85 or higher.
Okay, so if it was 80%, then you'd be 87,600 for the year. So you'd be about 7,300 a month on average.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So for the duplex, 7,300 a month. I mean, that's a makes sense number, I think. Okay, now in terms of expenses you have for operations, you have utilities, right?
Yeah.
So utilities, what do you think? You're probably like $300 a month
in that range. Yeah.
Okay, and then maintenance, you're gonna have maintenance. Do we do a 5% budget? Do you guys budget for that, or?
We do. I think typically 3%, knowing a good chunk of it is for the landlord for maintenance.
Okay, so 3% would be $2,600 a year. I mean, does that cover the paint you got? If you guys have to repaint the thing, or if there's a couple of plumbing incidents, that covers it.
Yeah. I would think that's even it's probably a conservative number, meaning it's on the high end.
It's less than that. Okay.
Yeah, because Airbnb does a fantastic job of reimbursing us for anything guest related. So it would have to be a lot of stuff that isn't being covered.
Okay, now insurance wise, are you guys buying any sort of policy to indemnify the landlord, or their insurance covers it?
Their insurance covers it along with the Airbnb coverage. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. In some cases, you could pass the Airbnb coverage on to them. Basically, anything that happens, it's taken care of. Okay, correct. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you have nothing for taxes because you don't own the place, and then you have your lease amount. So your lease amount on that place, if it's doing $7,300 a month on average, what are you paying per month? You figure ballpark.
For the maybe call it 3,400, 3,500.
So that'd be about 40,800 if it was 3,400. Management, you guys don't pay anything. It's just your own expenses if there are any.
That's right.
So there's like an internal number we could use, maybe like a few $100s. Like if I did 1%, that's $800. Does that sound about right?
Let's go with that.
Okay, now what about cleaning, miscellaneous, and consumables? Is that on top of the numbers we've discussed? Like
the consumables and supplies we would add on to that. Call it $400 a month. All consumables and supplies there, but the cleaning fee is covered by the revenue. So the revenue number I gave you is also the cleaning fees.
Okay, so the cleaning fees are on top of that, so that's just adjusted out.
Yes, okay. Sir.
So your cash flow on that is, let's just see, because there's no mortgage, not for you anyway. So you're like $2,500 a month on that place. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, that's probably a little bit higher. We might be missing something, but because like I mentioned, right, 20 grand to invest, 25 grand for the year. So that sounds like 30 grand, but it's in the ballpark.
Yeah. So if you're 30 grand, you're about 130% ROI. What do you?
Yeah, that's right. And the goal is 125. So we're definitely in the neighborhood there. And they call it other fees. Maybe the in-house costs are higher, right? We have our virtual assistants, we have our accountant and bookkeeper. So we're really talking net here is 125.
Right. Yeah. That's why it's a little bit of a lie to say our management is 1% when we know we have a team we pay on the internal.
That's
It's
right.
like, it's about allocating that cost because it's tough to allocate it sometimes, right? Um,
Yes.
it's super helpful to get granular with this stuff just to see how it plays out. So, I mean, when
I
you're
should have
working
brought
with,
on. I should have brought on my CFA. He would have
that's
broken. He
good.
would have given you precise numbers all the way down. My fault.
See, I don't even want the precise. I just want the back of the envelope. But because I don't want to detract from the concept, right? Like, nice to get granular with some stuff, but we've got a good picture of what it is that you're doing here. Tell me about what are some of the things you do to make your places, wow.
Yeah, amenities are helpful depending on the location, and so we're talking like ping pong tables, workstations, so like a nice desk with the proper monitor setup, and where people are traveling for work, it's nice to give them those extra pieces there. And we're starting to use some. We're exploring interior design as well. So our
Mhm.
properties look great. Our in-house team, our partner, she does a fantastic job designing these places. But we're realizing more and more that those properties, that they're the same properties, but if you really know how to make a place wow, it just attracts those extra.
Yeah.
You can just garner higher revenue. So we think it's worth our upfront investment. Call it, instead of 20 grand to stage a place, if we can spend 23 or 24 and get some help from an interior designer, and over the period of the
Mhm.
lease, we would expect to make more than that money back.
Right. Yeah, and that makes sense. Like, I'd be on board with that too, because I definitely see the value in that. Um, I guess the challenge is finding an interior designer for 3 grand.
Yeah,
Somebody
fair enough.
you almost need to just find. They don't have to be like educated in the area, but if they just got a knack for it, and then hire them. Come on,
That's exactly what we're trying
select
to
the stuff.
explore.
You can even find people who do that on Fiverr and stuff, and probably on Upwork, who will do it virtually, right? Show them the rooms, and they'll make a suggestion list for everything you should buy for the place.
Yeah,
And
that's exactly right. And through our first 5 months, it's crazy to only think it's only been 5 months, but it was all just getting these properties up, making sure our process were being built behind the scenes. Like, it's been a wild ride. Just recently, things have started to settle where the four owners are having a chance to kind of do a full-on business review, assess our business as a
Mhm.
whole, assess our portfolio, use data to influence our future decisions. So we had a full-blown weekend to review everything about our
Mhm.
business and think about where we go from here. How do we improve our systems? How do we improve our value to our guests, improve the value
Mhm.
for our real estate investors? Really asking all the questions about how do we make our company better. We
Mhm.
haven't really had a chance to ask those questions enough along the
Yeah.
way, but we're certainly asking them now, and we're going to be adjusting our approach and our processes to make sure we're building something special here.
Yeah. Like, what are the next steps for you? Like, where are you taking the business from here?
Yeah. So the U.S.
Yeah.
We are expanding to the U.S. and the I think the most obvious reason for it is just the margins. In Southern Ontario, they're okay. The business certainly works. It's viable, profitable. It's great. But we know we can run the same business with the same effort and the same
Mhm.
investment in other locations that just have a natural higher profit margin. And so if we're talking, we do just over 2x maybe of rent on Airbnb revenue. So similar to the numbers we just
Mhm.
talked about, right? If our overhead for the property is 3,500 of rent, we might do 7 grand or so in revenue. Whereas places in the US, there's lots of them that will easily do
Mhm.
3x. And sometimes we're talking about close to
Yeah.
4x.
Any
And that's just
cities that
the
come to
natural
mind,
market.
like offhand?
Uh, yeah. So a few states in particular. I'll start with like Virginia, Florida, New Mexico. There's a few of them. Within Florida, there's so many good ones. Orlando's fantastic. Fort Lauderdale. Um, and
Okay.
then within Virginia, Alexandria is a city that we're looking at.
Yeah, it's right outside of Washington, right?
Yes, sir.
Interesting. Okay. Now, yeah, I was thinking why were our numbers off before. We didn't include anything for landscaping because you are going to have to do that garbage
Yes.
removal, like somebody to come to the house. Who would you have do stuff like that?
Yeah, we call it a boots on the ground is part of our trusted power teams in every city. And so this is someone, usually someone young, motivated, looking to make some extra money. And so they're flexible. Their hourly rate is reasonable. They do a lot of our ad hoc jobs. If they need to run errands or go meet the guest for some reason, or meet a technician that's coming to the property, take out extra garbage to the curb, we usually have someone there on standby. But our process is we usually have guests bring their garbage and recycling to the curb on the night before garbage. Most are fully fine doing that. And if they don't like the idea, we'll pay someone to do it.
You get your guests to do it?
Yeah. It's typical. We did the research in the area that it's just kind of a question like, how's your stay so far? Hope everything's going well. Just so you know, it's garbage and recycling pickup tomorrow. If you don't mind, bring it to the curb. And we even say like, but if you'd rather not, no problem. We'll take care of it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I love to see the response guests have. Have you had any to say no way?
I mean, out of hundreds of guests across our properties, I think we had 2 that kind of, were like, didn't like the idea of doing it. And I mean, the cost that it saves to not have someone responsible fully for taking the garbage, like it's a monster number.
It's monstrous, yeah.
And so we weren't sure, to be honest, Andrew. We thought like, hey, like as we were thinking of all the ideas of how we can improve our costs and without bringing down the experience, we thought like people probably wouldn't mind that, especially for these suburban properties. We can see vacation properties, touristy properties. People are going there for, that's a different type of Airbnb. These people are here for work. They don't mind.
For sure. Okay. Yeah, that's a good distinction to make. Charles, I could probably ask you questions for hours, but unfortunately I'm time restricted today. So why don't you tell us where people can find you or learn more about you?
Yeah. So Instagram is probably the best location to follow our journey along. We haven't spent too much time on the page just yet, but we're ramping up for sure. So if you want to see where we go from here, that's the place you'll find us. And I think that you put that in the notes typically, but it's at Crompton_elite_REI. And that's where you'll find us.
Perfect. It's super interesting what you're doing. Very ballsy, and quitting your job like that. I guess you just you obviously had a little bit of a fallback in terms of what you've built through your career and your investments.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of confidence in yourself and the concept, right?
That's it. Hey, jobs will always be there. Creating something special, those opportunities only happen once in a while. So we don't see it as a risk. We see it as living our best life.
Awesome. Okay. Any parting words of wisdom for would-be action takers who want to get into this type of thing?
Reach out. I'm opening up some coaching slots as well, not just for arbitrage, but for creating wealth. I was a professional coach for a while in my career, and I love doing it, love helping people. So just don't be afraid to reach out. Just send us a DM on Instagram. I'll connect with you, and if it's just a chat or be part of our coaching program. Yeah, cool. Let's do it.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing. And let's stay in touch. And I mean that, like, if ping me every once in a while. I'd love to see how things are going.
Absolutely. I'll do that. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Please make sure to share this episode far and wide. Help it help more people. I really appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you on the next one.